Welcome back to another episode of our Mega-lo-Mania in Unreal Engine. So it's been a few days since last stream on Monday, I think. And I have thought about and tested a few things since and have come up with a bit of a plan on how to proceed. So last time we were looking at the sector green and sector red actors that I created that currently look like this, where the buildings were added as paper sprite components, and that was working fairly well in terms of just kind of testing things, verifying what happened under certain circumstances. I created the HUD with some population text. Never changed that one, nonetheless. Got that replication to work, verified kind of some nuances with that, and also verified some complications with how that works with the ownership, and specifically the viewable by owner or not viewable by owner, as the case may be. So that helped me kind of define some criteria on kind of at least another way of doing it that I wanted to test out, and hopefully make some better progress with. So the core of what I've done is I've created another sector class blueprint, and this one actually inherits from pawn, so it's possessable by the player. Obviously within this game the sector itself won't move, but the sector now is possessable by a player, and within that I've added the core components. I've created a slab actor that I have added as now a child actor component, simply by dragging that actor into this actor. And then on top of that I've also added the factory, lab, mine and castle, and they are again actor components, child actor components, so they all have, slab and buildings alike, all have their own actor classes here. So the buildings themselves actually all inherit from the building. I'm not sure if that's necessary, but there will, to be fair, there definitely is some similarities in terms of how they're built and how they're destroyed, somewhat similar. So that should be useful, but I've put it in there just in case. And then we've got the slab actor as well, and then we've got this sector pawn, and I've put them into the world again using our 2 cameras and 2 players that we've previously had, and as we can see both sectors are visible and the castle is not visible, intentionally so, but both sectors are visible. So what I was trying, or just verifying earlier today, was the connectivity between the child and the parent, particularly because the sector obviously lists them as child actor components, so you would expect that the sector can interact with them, and it can just by simply dragging those in. We now get a reference to that particular child actor component, and from that we can, for example, as we've done with the castle, set the visibility, and in this case we've said hide it. And we can also, and we've done it from the castle in this case, just really quickly, we've got the get parent actor node that we've used to cast to the sector, because we know that it's the sector, and we get from that our epoch property, which we just display on screen. If for some reason that cast fails, we just print something else, but that I didn't expect to happen, and nicely so it doesn't. So we can see the spam of the 9500 BC, and that's for all of the buildings. No, sorry, it's not for all of the buildings, it just comes up a few times because of the server client kind of scenario. So the server and the clients, because this is running under the dedicated server mode, all print out that string, because the castle is created in all 3 places, and there's 2 castles, so it's printed 6 times. Now, the sector has 4 properties. The epoch, fairly straightforward enumeration of the epoch, which is replicated. The state, which I've defined as either empty, occupied, owned, claimed, or conflict. And they are a quick idea of what kind of states our sector might come under. And that's also replicated. We have an array of resources, which is replicated only to the owner. An array of armies, which is again replicated to everybody. These are kind of a little bit unknown of exactly whether they're just going to be arrays of names or arrays of something else, particularly related to the resources, where we know we've also got quantity. And the quantity of each individual resource is persistent, whether the sector is lost or reclaimed by the same or different players. Castle has a population, technologies that have been unlocked, technologies that have been researched, and building projects. One thing I don't know, that I have yet to verify within the original, was if a technology is unlocked within the sector, whether they remain unlocked for new players or whether they too have to research them. Particularly, again, under if the player loses a sector and then regains that sector, would they have to start the research again? But that's to be determined. But so for now, I've put the research technologies within the castle under the assumption that you don't maintain unlocked technologies. You don't maintain research technologies, but you certainly don't maintain unlocked ones. Unlocked would be, in this context, just confirm with my notes. Yeah, so this is technologies in which the sector has the resources to build or to actually research that technology. So if a particular technology requires resources you don't currently have, then it wouldn't be considered unlocked. Building projects will relate to building of the mine, the factory, and the lab. Again, the fact that it's an array of names is somewhat temporary until kind of get into the details of it. And look at the mine, the lab, and the factory. So the mine simply has a count of miners. The lab has a count of researchers and the name of the project, which would be the name of the technology that the player is currently researching. And actually it would also have the remaining time. I missed that one off. Integer replicated to the owner. So research is replicated to the owner, project is replicated to the owner. We have a factory. Again, we don't have the remaining time on here for some reason. So again, that would be the remaining time for that particular factory job. It is possible to have a job that is unlimited. So that would have to be taken into account with our information at some point. And that is, you can set it to make an unlimited amount of things. It is limited, in fact, by the resources that sector has, but it's for scenarios where the player wants as many as they can make, and that's the concept. So all of these just simply have the paper sprite component with the appropriate image. The lab is the first tech level in which a lab is available, I believe. Although I'm not certain of that, actually. I think that might be a bit too high. I think the lab is available in the velvety, fluffy kind of section. Building mine. Yeah, so it should be that one, just for consistency. The factory, again, is the first tech level in which the factory is available, and the mine is the first level the mine is available. And the castle is the first. But obviously that is actually going to change based on the tech level of the sector. So I think that's where I'm going to start, because the tech level of the sector is something I have available. So get the direction controls. That one. There we go. Go down. So at the moment I'm just placed them on the screen or within the world, and I'm going to go to our building sprites. So we've got the 4 for the 6th tech level, as it was. So this will be building castle 1. Just confirm that this is the right one. So yeah. I'll just quickly go through these and rename them. So we'll put, once we've renamed all of these, we'll put them into a array within the appropriate building actor, and then hopefully we'll just be able to pull from the sector the tech level and pick the appropriate building. So it's 7. Oops. Got that one completely wrong. Almost done. 9. So that's that. So we'll start with the castle. So we can create our variable, which it will be sprites. We can make it a set map is what we want. So we want epoch to paper sprite. So one issue that I've had with the enums before is that when you're using a sprite, because it defaults to the first one, you can't have two with the same name or same value. It won't let you add another until you've defined that. So I have to define them backwards. Oh, I'm just going to define them there so that we can continue to add them, which is a bit confusing. It's probably best just to pick them and then sort them out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so 8, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Nope. So only issue is I can't see which ones I've already done. $900 here, 100, and then that should be 3,000. Yeah, so that's a bit annoying. I think what I'll do, at least temporarily, is add another value to that epoch, just so I can get that order right. Not that it makes a great deal of difference to the set itself. The set would be able to cope with it, but it's just much easier if it's all correct. Don't think there's any way to reorder, no. That's fine. So, a bit tedious. Oop, 19. It's annoying that that error comes over the top of it as well. I think if I did it in a window, it won't do that. Yeah, it's better. Almost. 45, 80, 2001, 7. Oops. Bit of lag there. So just do the castle one complete, and then we'll verify that or we'll do the graph code to make it work, just to make sure that the concept works. Although I'm fairly confident that it will. So we've already got the epoch because we're printing out the screen. The only thing we'll do is promote the sector to a variable, and we'll just do that so that we don't have to keep converting it every time we need it, because we're going to need it more than once. And then from here we will get the sprites, and we'll find that epoch. Give it a bit more of a generic name. And then we'll set the sprite to our new sprite. And we'll see if that works. So So our sector, I think, is still hiding the castle, so we'll just get rid of that. So we shouldn't really see any change because the sector should be the same as it was before. But we can change the sector because it's exposed on the blueprint level. We can change the sector. And we can see that that works. So a slight improvement that we can make to that is to put it instead into the, well, at least as well into the construction script. Probably don't want to do it here at all. So now, yeah, thought so. So now actually, now we can change it here and it reflects it immediately. That doesn't make a great deal of difference in terms of the gameplay, but it makes it a little bit easier to test and to verify that things have gone right. Now obviously, the tech level of the sector can change, and when it changes we need to make sure that the castle and the other sprites work in the same way. So what we're going to do is add to the sector an event which is gained tech level. I use gained tech level because there's some audio within the game where so it doesn't use gained, I think. Advanced tech level. Yeah, so the audio in the game says you have advanced to tech level. So I think it'd be quite neat to do that. So what we'll do, just for convenience in terms of using it, we'll specify what the epoch is within that event. We can test this with a small delay of 3 seconds, and oh no, we don't need to promote it, do we? We'll just pick that number instead, and we'll have to make sure that none of them are 1400 by default because they're both going to go to 1400, so that's fine. That's fine. And then we need to actually utilize that within the building. Now, this may be a scenario where we can utilize our base building class. Find the right area, because the base building class is going to, where did it go? It's going to want some similar code. So what we can do, they're actually all going to want that. So we'll take that, remove that property from here. We'll go into our base building and we'll paste it here instead. So obviously having it here and setting it locally is going to assume that the building is only ever used as a child component of a sector. That's an assumption that's kind of safe to make at the moment. There may be problems with that if we ever change the way that this structurally works, which is one of the reasons why getting that structure right is important, because we could spend quite a lot of time building this up and find that something doesn't work as a child parent actor, and we're going to have to do a lot. But equally we can spend a long time trying to find out what the right way is, as I already have done. So I'm going to try and kind of just work with it and see how far we get. So its constructor script gets that reference, and we can also get that advanced tech level event right here. And what we can do is call, what we're going to have is a new function called set sprite for epoch. What we'll do is just So just trying to see what this all means. So we've got the function set sprite for epoch, but from the building actor, that's never actually going to do anything. We also have this very, very long named bind event sector K2 node component bound event 0 advanced tech level delegate signature. That's quite a mouthful. Function here. And and we can also override our set sprite for epoch function here. Doesn't look like we can override it as a function, which is a bit weird. We would have thought you'd have just created a function like this one did. Not that that makes a great deal of difference. So that's quite a long-winded name, but I think that this is going to work just as well. We'll just print a string there. Oh, sorry, wrong blueprint. Here we go. Print a string here. So we call that sector hello. That one can be castle hello. Now the thought was that I could just simply call the function set sprite for epoch here, and then override that function in the others. But if they can use the event directly, then there's not really any benefit of doing that. Yeah, so we can also do this. Thought that might be the case. So just trying to see the options available for our parent-child, our base class and our child class against the sector event. So our sector will trigger that event after 3 seconds and give it an epoch. And we've just got a few print screens to kind of see which one of those capture it. So print screens were a bit quick, but we can check the log. So yeah, the server said castle hello, server said castle, yep. Client said it, client 1 said it for castle sector, sector hello. I forgot what I named them all now. So they both had so this print screen occurred multiple times for all the buildings. It was printed out for all the buildings, which is what we'd expect. The mine said it, the factory said it, the lab said it, even though they themselves don't do it. That's fine. So that's capturing the event at the very bottom level. In our scenario, there's nothing we can do here. We can't, at the moment, we can't handle the epoch in any of the other for any of the buildings because we don't have a list of the sprites. Yeah, okay. This one did print out too, but that's got a sillily long name, and I think that's actually some kind of relationship to our sector event that we have here. So that's kind of a connection to it. It worked, but we don't need it because this one also worked. Now what I'm thinking actually is because the setting of the epoch, setting of the sprite is actually generic, we should be able to take, we'll copy that, but we'll rename that to C for castle, and we'll add a variable here called sprites. We'll make that epoch map again to our paper sprite. You can't replicate maps, but we don't need to replicate them because all the instances of these buildings will be able to populate that themselves. It doesn't matter to replicate it. So what we can do then is, in the construction script even, take map. That's what I wanted. So it's a bit more tedious to set this up. And because we don't have any way to define what those variable types is, what we have to do is take a map we've already created. Maybe that's not the best way. We'll do it this way instead. So we'll create a paper sprite. It doesn't really matter what they're called, but what we want is the epoch and a paper sprite. So if we define those, we can now plug them into our keys and into our values, and then once we've set one of them, we can now remove it and set it manually. From, oh, I forgot to set one of them. We can delete them now, because they're not used. Delete that. Didn't need to delete that. Sprites. Set. So what we have done here is defined or populated the base class as sprites map, and then we can take this and place it here. We don't need our function set sprite for epoch. We don't have the sprite component, access to the sprite component from this context. We can fix that. We need get, find, plug in the epoch from there, sprite over there. So we will need a branch in this case, because sometimes a building doesn't actually exist for an epoch. In that case, we'll want to set the visibility to the sprite, the paper component, to nothing. But the issue is that we don't have our paper sprite component within this context, because their paper sprite component has always been defined at their own level. Now, that, I think, is just a technicality of the way I set this up. I don't think if we remove our paper sprite here and we go to our building and we add our paper sprite component here, that will make any difference in terms of the functionality of this process. So it's definitely going to be static. And just looking for that billboard number. There it is. The billboard's already down, so that's fine. Yep, so now it's complaining that our paper sprite in our event graph is not set. Now we've got one, we can set it. And in this case, we're going to set the visibility to non-visible. So we know our castle is partly set up, but we're just going to have to finish the equally tedious task. So we'll remove that. Ah, inherited. Fairly decent. Just remove these things. Hopefully that will get rid of some of the warnings that I've got. Nope. It's saying something is not static. So we've got to make sure that all our components, even though they're inherited, need to be static. Trying to clear up some of the warnings that I'm getting when I compile, because things aren't static. Okay, good. Whole lot of things changed just to say something is static, but they're all static now, and they all don't have their own picture. So we're just going to have to fill in. I don't need that new function anymore. In our construction script, this make map. Unfortunately, our existing map, I don't think is any use to us. So there's no way to paste it in here. So I'm just going to have to redefine it all over again. 9, 14, 18, 19. So that should be all of them. 9, 3, 1, 9, 9, 14, 18, 19. 19, 19, 21. Yep. So building castle underscore, copy that. 1, 2, 3. Pressing the wrong one. 7, 8, 9, and 10. Compile and save that. So we've got a fallback for when a particular tech isn't available already. We don't see any text there. If we click play, after 3 seconds, we should see it. We saw the textual output. Did it again, but we didn't see the building come up. One thing that we haven't got is anything in the construction script to set that. So this is the sector, this is the building construction script. So we get a reference to the sector. What we can do yeah, I think what we can do is in the construction script we can call our that's what we wanted. Call that function. Get the epoch of the sector. Pass that in. Compile. What's that? Ah, okay, that's calling it on the wrong place. It's a really long name. Don't know if that's the right one. Yes, I'm not confident it's actually coming in here in the construction script. What we'll do is just grab all of that, just quickly drop it into a function just to see if it works better in this context. So the sector should have a value now. Just in case it's working but not displaying. Yeah, so we are getting a lot of noops. Ah, okay. No, I know what that is. Our castle defines the make map before or after, sorry, calling the parent. We can obviously do it that way. And if we compile that now, yep, we don't get the nope there. We should in the, hopefully in this view, see it. Okay, we see it here, but okay, we do see it here when it's compiled, so that's what we wanted. So we need to define the same thing for the mine. So a little easier this time because we can just copy the thing directly. We know the mine's not available for the first and the second tech levels. So it's definitely not available for the first, but the, let's see if it's in here. Nope. Textures. Not that one. That one. There we go. So that black hole there is the mining pit that is available, and I think that basically is a tier 2/3, I'm not exactly sure, mine effectively. So what we'll do is we'll get the right one, that one, top out the pit. I think it was 3. Yeah, so 4 is an actual mine itself and 3 is our pit. So we'll remove the first and the second. 900 AD will be our building mine. Let's copy that. 3. Is that correct? Nope, gone too far. It's just slightly easier if we start again with that, because I'd removed one too many. So the first one we don't want. Second one we don't want. Third one. Should be the mine. And 4, 5. Done one twice. And none for the 9th one. So apply that to our lab. So our lab's slightly easier. Building lab. So it's just 6, 7, 8, and 9. We'll do it backwards. 9, 8, 7, 6. So again, we can just blank out all the ones we don't need. But I could take them out of the map. I probably will, just to kind of make it a bit clearer. But we can handle it being a non-value as well. So there's a few more factories in this case. Again, just do it backwards. All the rest are already none anyway. So now when we compile all of these and save them all, we should see we have a first castle because our tech level is 3000 BC. If we change that, we get the castle and the mine. Change it again, castle and mine, castle, mine and factory, all the way up to that one, all 4 of them. If we go back down, again they disappear, so that's working correctly. And then the final castle. So that works perfectly. Obviously there's a few that I didn't try. There may be some errors with the maps that I've created. But for the most part that seemed to be okay. So the key for 0, we'll remove that just in case I go wrong. We'll remove the first one, the second one, and the final one. So it should be otherwise the same. So it's just a little bit easier to manage if there's none of these empty pairs. So that's worked out fairly well. Now there's another layer in the fact that just because a epoch is set doesn't actually mean the buildings exist, but we can deal with that later on once we get that kind of concept in. So if we play now, this one should start at the very lowest one, this one should start again where it is. So we can play, and now after 3 seconds they should change. Okay, they didn't change. Let's find out why. I think the code's all in place to just tiny up that event correctly. So we trigger the event here, so there's no problem there. The building... Yeah, so the building event graph was calling this function. I want to know... Yeah, so I think I'll keep this one. Set sprite for epoch. Just because having it in a function works. Keeps it clean. We don't need to print anything when it's not got a sprite. And we can undo that and just call our function. What we'll do is just print something out just so we know that it happens. Right, since it was here. So we set it to 1400 AD on that event. Okay, so the lab disappeared. Sector 2. It didn't quite do what I intended it. So it's a bit well spaced out. Don't need to do that anymore. Nor that. Nor any of that. See if that's the problem. Yeah, so they're failing to set the sprite. Seem to remember there was something about not being able to set paper sprite component sprites after they'd been set. So according to the information here, you can't set a sprite to something after it's been constructed, or at least not unless its mobility is anything but static or stationary, which in my case it is, so it should therefore work. Like there's a way to set the mobility. It's a bit frustrating because so far as I've seen, it's not possible to, or it's unadvised to add additional paper sprites, and you can't set the sprite. I mean, my set is definitely non-mobile. Just seeing if there's anything else in here that might make any difference to whether I can set it or not. Yeah, a whole lot of false saying. Nope. The thing we do want to do though is just make this only done on the server, because of the sectors. Epoch's never going to change elsewhere. We also want to handle the event here so that we can set the epoch locally. It may not be used in the future, but it likely will be important to have that consistency. So we also, I think the lab doesn't disappear now because our paper spike component doesn't replicate. So we'll try that. not set the replication settings on the actors themselves. So in this case, they're always going to be relevant and they always replicate, because every player, there's certain properties that everybody needs to see. So hopefully that will mean that at least the lab will disappear. Yeah, so that's something. But the sprites still don't update. It is a little bit tedious, to be fair. It's one of those scenarios where you think, well, why does it not? What has made it problematic to do it in the engine? That means that it doesn't show up. And it's kind of, it's also worse in the fact that there's no output log stating why it's not shown at all either. And unfortunately I haven't sorted out Visual Studio. I don't think I've sorted out anyway. Wait until that loads the project. I'll just see if there's any way for it to. Oh, I think I may have actually sorted out Visual Studio. See if there's any way within the code that we can identify why it's not working. The alternative is to add to the actors an array of paper sprites instead. So instead of switching the sprite, we simply instead of switching the sprite of the paper sprite actor, we simply display or hide the paper sprites in the actor themselves. That obviously will work, it's just not quite as good. So we'll look for source, editor, maybe there's a way to search paper sprite. Okay, so yeah, lots and lots of results. So we're looking for the paper sprite component here. So the paper sprite component has a public function of set sprite. Let's see if we can get to the source of that. So first check, new sprite is not equal to source sprite. That makes sense. If the component owner is nobody, so if it's not owned, that's going to be problematic because we are going to own it. It's going to be owned and possessed. according to the comment, it's don't allow it if we're static. Okay, maybe that's where the problem was. But the owner thing's going to be a problem anyway. Does it mind if that one is stationary and the other ones are not? Let's find out. Okay, the server said true in a few occasions there, although I don't see any visual change. What we can do is set in the sector the event graph event to trigger the final epoch. Yeah, so it says true, but nothing actually happens. Just make sure everything is stationary in the castle. All the way up. To the top. Try again. Yeah, so it says true, at least. But it doesn't look like it's being replicated. Perhaps that's the problem here. Although I saw that it was replicated before, so I just don't think it is actually changing it. Let's just check the replication. The paper sprite that's inherited. Component is replicated. Scene root, we'll just make that replicate as well. Castle itself, replicate, always relevant. So building, component replicates. Scene, component replicates. Building replicates. And finally, component replicates here, replicate the slab, replicate the scene root, and the top level itself. Some of them I might not need to replicate, like the scene root, that might not need to be replicated, but all I've done now is set everything in the hope that I've got what I need. No, still no effect. According to the code, which we were looking at, sector controller, that one. Only time it would return true is if it's actually worked. See if that works. May take a little bit longer to actually run because it's probably the first time I've done it this way. But yeah, as I say, even if the static or mobility setting works, it's probably not going to work because the component actor, the owner, is going to be set at some point. Awkward because it's loading a different editor session. Not sure this is going to work. Yeah, it still says I can't hit those breakpoints. Let's not do that. Okay. So changing the sprite doesn't look like it's going to work. A little bit irritating, since I can't see any reasoning behind the restrictions they put in place. I'm sure there are some, they just don't make it clear. However, we can solve that a different way. We know there's only 10 epochs, and we know therefore that there can only be 10 images per 10 sprites per building. So what we'll do is just duplicate the sprite 10 times. And we will name these according to the epochs, just for convenience and for clarity. Just in case this doesn't work too, I'll stop there and we will create a map of our call it paper sprites this time, and in the construction script, first thing it will do trying to make sure I get this right. Yep. First thing it will do is make the map. Make map. So we'll take, again, we just need a epoch variable. As a key, and our paper sprite variable as our value. Oops, done it again. So 9. So we just tie up our sprites with our appropriate values. 100, 900. And it takes a bit of time to compile now because we've got all of them open. Now we've got these paper sprites here. Instead of setting that map, I won't remove it just yet, just in case. I'll just move it over there. Instead of setting the map, it needs to actually set the sprite on all of these inherited values. So we're in the castle now, so we'll set again this whole tedious process of setting all the things up. Make sure after we do all of this I think it's 11 we call the parent. I don't think there's an easy way of doing this than what I'm trying. I mean, we could put them in an array, but I don't think. Yeah, I mean, we probably could code it to do it rather than kind of create all these. Oops, almost. For each epoch value. Let's give it a go. So in the parent, so the parent needs a mapping of each of the epochs with each of the sprites, probably. But what I'm thinking is that we can make an array that will hold all of our sprites. So I think it'd be easier if I just finish off. I think there's just a little bit more setup to this solution, but hopefully it'll work once it's done. So we don't need that anymore. Not too many, I think. Hope. 100 AD, 14, 15. 19, 19, 19, 20. So we first make that array. Yeah, so I think what we can do then is byte to epoch. So it's a programmatic way of setting up the sprites. Paper sprite component object reference, paper sprite object reference. Yes, that's true. Paper sprite should be paper sprite component now. So again, we'll do that after. So what we're doing here is we've got an array of all the paper sprite components, and we're iterating through that array for each index, which is basically just a counter. We can convert that to the appropriate epoch value. Now, one thing that we have to bear in mind is that we did add the non onto the epoch. So I think for now, we have to account for that with a minor addition. And then so we take the index, we add one to it to account for the non-value on our enumeration, and then we convert that into our enumeration to put into our array. And sorry, our set. And then set sprite for enum. Currently we're referencing just that one sprite, so we take that out. And obviously we're not actually going to set the sprite. We are just going to set the visibility of the one we want. So what we need is so we don't need that. So we need to go maybe we can just loop over here. Get yeah, so we have to iterate over the epoch value, which is fine. Equals that one. So if the epoch we're on equals the epoch for this iteration, we want to set the visibility of the paper sprite to true. But in all cases, we want to find that sprite and set the visibility. So if it equals, we want it to be true. That should be fine. If we find it, let's put that there. Delete that. I think that's fine. So in this case, we want to, well, we've got this array, a mapping even, that we've created previously. What we can do in the parent construction script, we create that array and the set. So we define paper sprites. At this point, the paper sprites don't have any actual sprite. So I think what we need to do instead is move all of that out of the way again. We're going to have to call the parent first because that's going to give us that paper sprites array. It's going to be set. Iterate over the epochs, and we can from here find the epoch and paper sprites. I think that's the one we want. Yep. And from our paper sprites we can find from there. So we'll just make sure that both values are true, that we found something. If we have found something in both cases, we can, on this one, set the sprite to this one. Still won't delete that just yet, but I will delete that. So that's programmatically setting the sprite for all of these in the construction script, hopefully. And that's programmatically creating that mapping. So hopefully we should, well, we don't see a castle, so that's not a promising start. Nope, let's see it, let's play it, see if that makes any difference. Okay, so playing it does change the result, and actually it did change the castle. Okay, that seemed to work. Have some errors in the output log. Might be because some of them haven't set sprite for epoch. So in the lab, okay, so the lab says it's not set up correctly, which is fine. So now we go copy that and So my consideration here is that, again, this bit of code is quite generic across all of the buildings, except for that bit. Sorry, for that bit, the mapping of sprites. So I think that stuff I can put into a function here. We'll call that update building for epoch. It's not great. We'll have another function called initialize paper sprites, and that will do the whole code that we had before. The only thing we have to pass in is a epoch to paper sprite object reference. So this will be our sprites, which will be a map of paper sprites. And we should be able to plug that in here now. Initialize this one, and it just passes that in. So now, hopefully, if we run it again, they both start off different. 3 seconds later, they change to what they should change to. Okay, so we'll now apply that to the mine. Now what we can do is create, see if we can copy that here. Nope. Can't copy it from there. So we'll define sprites. So we'll call it the mine sprites instead. And over here we'll call that the castle sprites. Can't have sprites because we've defined that here. Don't know why we've defined it here actually, and defined it here. I suppose defining it in this level is probably a bit better because we don't ever need it again. So I'm going to just remove it from here. We'll leave it as castle sprites, mine sprites, just because it's a bit clearer. So to speed the process of defining it up, we can, from this castle sprites, copy all of the elements and paste them here. We know that mine doesn't have that. One advantage with having it at this level is that you get to see the image. When it was all in the code, you didn't get to see the image. That's the mine done. Lab sprites. So again, we can just copy all of those here, so we don't have to redefine all the enums. Almost done. So the factory does have a few more. Just the 5. So the visibility doesn't seem to have worked for some of them. We do seem to have spikes on top of spikes here. There's also quite a lot of errors within the output log, where it's really not quite silently accepting the fact there's no spite for that particular epoch. Let's see. Yeah, so it has a contains function. That might keep it quiet. So we always have a paper sprite for the epoch, but we don't always have an actual sprite itself. Pulled it from the wrong one. I think if we run the contains first, it will be less upset about that. It's calling set spike to, it shouldn't be. Oh, sorry, it should for the initialize. So really we just want it to continue if that's true. We don't really need to do the check anymore at this level, because we just won't do that find. see if that makes fewer errors. So we also will have to do that for the, well actually we don't need to do it for here because this one just sets the visibility. One thing we will do is just set them all to non-visible. So yeah, unfortunately I'm still getting a whole bunch of warnings. Update building for epoch in this case. Just make sure, so it's parent, child and then parent for each case. So we've got to do that before we do initialize. In the construction script. We do that and then we call update building for epoch. So there's some seems to be some duplication here with multiple castles, so I'm just gonna remove that. Put it back. The same with this one. No, still getting a whole bunch of errors. Despite the fact that visually looks correct, it's stating that when it does do the change, access none, trying to read property, map find value, so it's trying to look in a map for a value in the update building for epoch call. So in our building, update building for epoch. I suppose what we don't do here is make sure that that find is successful. Maybe it was this find that it was causing errors on in the first place rather than the previous one. Yeah, okay, so no errors now. Shouldn't be any errors anyway. There should be never a case where the non-value, that's what it is, non. Again, that that one's catching us out. We handle the non-value there. Yeah, so I think what we can do is handle the non-value better in this array by just tying them up correctly to account for it. So at least now the array has a non-value effectively, so we don't have to do the awkward +1. And we've actually reintroduced an error back into the update building, because now the find is successful, but the paper sprite object reference is actually invalid. So we'll check both. Before we use it. And that should work without any errors or warnings. Yes, good. So it appears the replication is working as well. I will probably go through and clean up the replication a little bit because there's quite a lot of it. Hello, Moon Now or Moon Owl. Sorry, Moon Owl. I don't know if you're still viewing. But I didn't see your question. So I'm making Mega-lo-Mania, which is a game from the 90s, originally released on the Amiga and Atari, etc. So I'm reusing the original graphics as well. Okay, so our sprite stuff works. That, as always, took a bit longer than I expected. And I did want to try and get a little bit more done. So we'll just tie things up. So I'm just going to give the players the ownership of these sectors as we had before, and with this one we can actually possess them, possessed by 0 and possessed by 1, so the player actually owns them. So now we've got the green and the red population, and within here well, one point is that we can't access both the green and the red population realistically, because we should only be able to see the population of what we possess. So I'm going to actually do it that way instead. Do that all the time. So we can get the player pawn, which is basically the pawn that is they're possessing. That's going to be a sector, so we want to cast it to a sector. Now ideally we don't want to do this all the time, but obviously the player can possess different sectors. We'll have to deal with that at some other point. We'll just run with this. So we, excuse me a minute. So we've converted it to a sector, and we can we get the castle? That's the thing. That's what we want. Get castle. So we're going to get the castle, and from that we're going to get the population. We are going to get the population. So can't get the population because the castle, using this method, is simply a child actor component object. We can use the get child actor and again cast that to the castle. What we could probably do, not that castle. What we probably will end up doing is doing this cast within the sector for all of the actors, because Mega-lo-Mania, hi again. I haven't really got to the main menu part, so not necessarily. I have a reasonable idea of what I'm going to do with it. So is there a specific issue that you're having with main menus? Is there an actual problem that you've not been able to resolve? So we can only show the population of our possessed, call it possessed, sector. Won't exit the main menu. So it's a bit of a diversion, but I do have a main menu here, and once it loads, there's very little to it. So if I run it, all I've got is the awkward widget from the bit that I was working on. So ignoring the castle population part, I have a button, and if I click the button, if I could click the button, one moment. That's because my test sector HUD does that. Should be the wall I need for that. Yeah. So if I click the button, it still doesn't do anything. Has worked a bit better than this before, so I'll just find what I need. It's not what I needed. Main menu, button. So I have had it where if I click the button, this event fires. I think maybe there's some issue with the cursor. I haven't actually done it since I introduced the cursor. I think the click is actually getting targeted to the cursor itself. So let's see if priority works. Nope. Okay. Yes, I'm just sorting out the hit, and my button isn't working at all. I think it's got a lot to do with the cursor, so I haven't actually tested anything with the cursor in that I put in. And now I don't see where my mouse is. Menu play controller. So I have had the menu that I've got here working. and that button did actually do what it should do, but for some reason something's broken. But the open level is what deals with the level transition, effectively exiting the menu. So you would open level with the name, the absolute name, assuming absolute is checked, the absolute name of the level you want to transition to. Unless... there we go. Player controller class, and game mode should be menu game mode. That's better. Yeah, okay, so now we can see the transition. Now this level's in a bit of a state again. There was work in progress and I've moved on to a different level to test different things, but we can see that both players are on the menu. If I click begin, at least player one's moved over. Because it's a dedicated server, I think that it does that. If I change it to a non-dedicated server, they're both part of the game, and I think that should transition both players. Yeah, so that transitions both players. So the open level is what you need to actually use to transition. As I say, is there anything that you can think of that might be causing a problem for you? Let's put my fancy cursor back in. Says there's a property called cursor, which is kind of irritating because there's not, but probably the level name. Yeah, I do find that it's a bit odd that it's just a name rather than some kind of selection of or another. And obviously you could create an array of them, you could create an array of names or define the names in some other way so that you would not or reduce the risk of misspelling it. But it's odd that it's just a name. Yeah, so if you do use the incorrect name, your output log should say something like this. Package name, search for package on disk, but failed to resolve, and then obviously the invalid name. It's also got invalid URL here, and a whole bunch of other issues. So if you do have the name wrong, it should be fairly obvious within the logs. If you're certain that it's calling the travel, the open level, node, then the only thing I can think of is that it's the name that's wrong. Because I don't think any options would prevent it from loading. They're just kind of information you'll transition over. Yeah, I mean, it's completely free form. It just has to match whatever you've called the level within the content. So there's no assuming you got the name the same, there's no reason why tutorial would work more or more likely than another. So somewhat of an issue with my own cursor is the fact that if you don't have the player controller show the cursor, the click event doesn't work, nor does the hover. That's it's another one of those frustrations. I'll have to deal with that another time. So just going to jump back to the sector test. Thought we could have a different game mode for each level, but it looks like the game mode is actually project settings nonetheless. Don't think I need a player controller for this one. But I did need the HUD, which I've got. So we reconnect that again. This, I think we got that. Oh no, we didn't quite get that right. Should just be gas population. And quite sure why the one on the right doesn't work, but we'll look at that in a minute. We'll give the castle some default population. Oh, well, that's new. Don't know what I clicked to cause that to happen. Don't know how far behind that was. Just before we set the population. So I don't think there's any reason why setting the population would cause problem. Oh. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of errors in the output log of the editor dying by changing that value for some reason, or related to that value being changed. Really want the castle sprites to be accessible in this case, but certainly can make them read-only. Can't make them read only because it doesn't work there. Not that it matters. The game's called Mega-lo-Mania. It's a game from the 90s, originally on like the Amiga and the Atari. One of my favourite kind of strategy games from that era. So it doesn't compare much to the strategy games of modern times, but I still found it to be a pretty good game, and it's still playable on things like DOSBox. I still have it, but there's obviously some awkwardnesses with it and the user interface and the way that it plays, which kind of get in the way of the core gameplay because it's old and it doesn't have the modern features that you would expect, and it doesn't have multiplayer. So yeah, I'm kind of just copying that. It was partly for kind of learning the editor as well, learning how to use Unreal and actually make a game without having to worry too much about what game or the difficulty of kind of designing my own game at the same time as learning the editor. It seemed like a good idea to do this. Obviously the game's not straightforward and simple in the grand scheme of things. It's not like trying to do Pong or some other kind of older arcadey style game which may be simpler. It's still quite complicated. Okay, so I don't know why it crashed, but we'll keep going. Hopefully it won't crash again. Yeah, making your own original game is certainly a better goal. Definitely if you want to kind of publicize the game or release it in any way, whether release it for free or whether to charge for it. Obviously, the game that I'm making, especially since I'm using all the original assets, which I don't own and therefore can't sell, it's not a commercially viable game that I'm making. Whereas obviously if you're making your own original game, you've definitely got that option. What is kind of the topic that you're making? What kind of game? An action-filled game, yeah. Sounds good. Games with action tend to make good games. So is it kind of like a arcadey style action game, or kind of a Street Fighter type combat game? .3D game. How long have you been working on it? Have you done anything much in Unreal before, or is this your first project? So I'm just trying to figure out how to get the population on my widget. That's going to be where the problem is. Get player pawn. That's odd because the player pawn should be set. Have you made previous games before in other engines? Or is this kind of like a first go and jump straight into it kind of thing? Yeah, it's going to make it pretty difficult if it's your first game, first project, first time with Unreal, and first game. I think just have to manage the scope of what you're trying to do. Try and deal with it in small chunks, and there's definitely no reason why you can't get it done. Just does make it difficult if you're trying to go from nothing to something. It's not too different to the situation I'm in. As I say, I've not used Unreal before. I've done a few kind of game related projects on and off, but I've never really seen something through to the end. But I do programming as my day job, so I've got that advantage for what good that does. It does not help me with Unreal when it's saying that it should be auto-possessed by a player and it's not. I think that might be because my camera is being possessed. Yeah, I think any reason to do it is viable. I mean, if you're trying to make a game to sell, to make money, then that's great. Or for fun. It's obviously about kind of making sure you put the time in and working on it regularly, for whatever reason. That's not what I wanted. So the auto possession doesn't look like it's working, or something like that. I don't know. So I'm going to try and possess them manually. So the right hand side worked, left hand side didn't. Player 0 didn't, player 1 did. Probably got the numbers a bit mixed up. Pretty certain I need to modify, because it says I decrement it there anyway. That's probably what it is, because I decrement it there. That value is actually that value. There we go. Yes, I'm not quite sure why the auto possessing didn't work. Perhaps because the players aren't joined automatically. But I thought that wouldn't make any difference. I thought it would possess them when they joined. Doesn't work there. Yeah, so it works for the server host when it's single player scenario. He possesses probably the right one. I can't guarantee that, but probably the right one. But it doesn't work in the other circumstance, so that's okay. It's not a big deal. I can do it manually. When it's actually put together and it's dynamically creating the sectors for the particular map you're on or island you're on, then the auto possession isn't going to make any difference anyway. But that works. I can get rid of that awkward delay. Don't need that anymore. I don't know if I need any of that. Let's give that a go. No, I don't. So that was all a red herring. That was just, I thought that perhaps the sector was being possessed, but therefore the other components didn't have the right owner. But they do have the right owner because the sector's possessed and it's the parent, so it propagates up the tree, which makes a lot more sense. So we don't need any of this now, because the value of the population comes directly from the castle. sure my errors are error colored. So we get the player pawn. We obviously do some casting, which would be better off avoiding, but I can fix that bit later on by making kind of consistent references within the sector on construction. It could create variables for each of the child actors after a cast, so that it's all consistent. And we basically just grab the population and put it on screen, and then we've put into the so that was increasing the population at the level section, which we don't want. That one we won't want in this way. So we'll get rid of that too. Let's clean up the sector test. Doesn't do anything now anyway. So tomorrow we'll work on trying to pull more data out of the actors that we have. Something that I did need to verify was that in the sector castle, that was only done on the server. And make it dedicated. So we've seen that the actual value is not being replicated properly. So population should be replicated to the owner. Again, don't know how much all this component replication matters, but that does imply, however, that there is no owner. Yeah, so that's a little bit annoying. Again, the owner of the castle isn't actually set when the parent actor, in this case the sector, is possessed. You would assume, or I would have thought that given there's a hierarchy there, and I guess there may be some circumstances where you'd want different players to own different child actors of an actor. I guess that does make sense, because the child actor stuff is literally just kind of creating that connection between one actor and another. So just so that it's not forgotten. Oops. Castle. Mine. That's neat. If you drop it onto a variable, it changes the variable. Not what I want, but it's neat nonetheless. So we'll just do this for all of the actors, just so that I don't forget to do it. Obviously we'll need the reverse as well. Maybe the slightly better approach let's see if this works. So what I was going to do is try basically take the player that possessed it and push that through, but perhaps we can do it a little bit more generically and say our self, which is the parent actor, the T sector actor, owns those. I'll get rid of that anyway. That works. Okay, so that's okay. That's not quite so dire, because we only have to do that once. I think we can just do it in every case. Yeah. So it does look like the parent kind of ownership hierarchy stuff does behave so long as there's owners to the child actors. We get away with having it all on one. Maybe we do. So we're saying that all of the child actors, Slab, Castle, Mine, Factory, Lab, all are owned by the sector. Doing that seems to solve the replication data issue. If we don't do that, our population doesn't change on our clients. So it's fairly straightforward and easily fixed. Okay, that's going to be all for tonight. Gone on a bit longer than I intended, but the image stuff, as usual, took a little bit of trial and error to get that right. But I'm fairly happy with how it's working now. I think it's definitely all kind of complete, barring potential mapping issues. I may have got some of the maps wrong, but the fact that we can change between the sectors, we can even do it at this level. So we can do all of the sectors. Actually looks like all the images are correct. So all the images, all the sectors tech level epoch propagates correctly to the buildings in terms of their image, their display, which is quite good. Definitely made it kind of nice and clean in that regard. So I'm pleased with that. We've got basic use of the UI to display properties from within the selected sector. I believe that if we move them closer, yeah, so the replication stuff appears to work correctly. The player can see the consistent stuff. I mean, obviously it doesn't change, so it's kind of hard to say right now. But perhaps if if the sector did change tech level, then the player would be able to see. But yeah, so not too bad going. Should be back on Friday. Might get a little bit of time to do some stuff tomorrow, but I'll probably do some try and do some kind of setup in terms of what's next, and then go through it on Friday. As I say, Friday I'm going to try and get more data from the actors, so more stuff about the buildings, perhaps if they exist properly or not. Just kind of keep going down that route of obviously not the proper UI, but at least some kind of semblance of how the data is going to be used within the UI, and potentially even some interaction, again just to kind of proof of concept the interaction between the actors. So yeah, that's all for now. Thanks for watching. If you are not following already, then please do. It's always good to have those followers and the recognition of people watching and being interested. And I shall be back again Friday. So that's all for now. Thanks very much.